Hi guys, welcome to today's class. I'm very sorry again that we're starting late. I'm on a temporary internet connection and unfortunately it's not working that well. Hopefully it's strong enough that we'll be able to get through the class. Lovely to see you, Inga.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. I would apologize now, not before. Now you should apologize. I'm just kidding with you. So yes, again, I'm very sorry for getting started late. I have had trouble connecting, but like I said, if I drop off the Hangout, then please be patient because I will definitely come back. It's just, unfortunately, I'm on a different connection and it's not very stable. So no problem, Nicola. Anyway, it's very good to see you all. Thank you for coming. We got Evgenia, Hazel, lovely to see you. This is the class that's in your honor.
Hello, thank you. I know.
It's a difficult topic, but hopefully I'll be able to shed some light on it and make it a bit easier. It's not actually that difficult, it's just there's a lot of different types of verbs to learn and things like that, which we can't do in the class, but I can point you in the right direction. Okay, we've got everyone here, so we should probably just get started because we're already quite late, which is my fault. Today we're going to be talking about gerunds and infinitives. I have made a document that I will share with you now. If you bear with me. You could all take a look at that document in the chat. What I've tried to do is give an overview of infinitives, the most important examples of when you will use an infinitive, and the same thing for gerunds, the most important times when you will use a gerund. At the same time, I've tried to link the two, and in many cases say, in this case you'll use a gerund, in this case you'll use an infinitive, because in a lot of cases it's not very clear, and you can use the same verb, for example, that will sometimes take a gerund and sometimes take an infinitive, and often they will mean the same thing or very close to the same thing. So it's very important to try to pull these apart and figure out when it's correct to use one and when it's correct to use the other. And like I said, sometimes you can use both, but you should need to be aware of when those times are. So the way we're going to go about things, first of all, if I have to give some credit, in making this document, this tutorial, a lot of the information was coming from an excellent, very thorough online tutorial that I'm going to post a link to. So when we finish the lesson, if something is still not clear to you, then I would highly recommend taking a look at the link that I just sent you. And I think with this combined with what we're going to go over today, by the end you should have a very good idea of where you stand with gerunds and infinitives. Okay, so let's start reading. I'm going to ask, it's always difficult if I should read or if we should get other people to. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to ask somebody to read down to the first link on the document that we have here, okay? So, who should I pick on? Inga, you're always very good at reading. Get it out. Let's get it out of the way.
Till the next yellow, yeah?
No, just no to the first link. To the first link.
Ah, okay.
You see?
Yeah. Gerunds and infinitives. 2 plus infinitive. We use 2 plus an infinitive to express purpose and to answer why. For example, he went to the supermarket to buy some eggs. She left early in order to avoid the traffic, so as not to wake the children. After certain verbs, especially verbs of thinking and feeling, for example, choose, decide, expect, forget, hate, hope, intend, learn, like, love, mean, plan, prefer, remember, want, would like, would love, or verbs of saying, for example, agree, promise, refuse, decide.
Okay, thank you. So to summarize that, probably the most common time when we will want to use infinitives is when we want to answer the question, why did someone do something? And then it's always to plus infinitive. Most of the time it's to plus infinitive, which is why I put that as the heading. In some cases, for example, with modal verbs, which some of you have done with me, you might just want the bare infinitive. And the bare infinitive is when you get rid of to and you just have the infinitive. But most of the examples we're covering today will require the preposition to, and that's how you usually use the infinitive. So to answer the question, why did someone do something? You can say they did it to reason. You can say they did it in order to, or so as to. All three of these expressions mean roughly the same thing. Okay? And then obviously, of course, we have these other examples of verbs of saying, thinking, and feeling. So I've put the main ones here. So if you can try to sort of learn them, and if you don't need to learn them one by one, but just, again, think of the categories. So when you're talking about thinking, or feeling, or saying something, right, then you usually have an infinitive after these, okay? So I decide to go somewhere. I remember to take the trash out, or something like that, okay? So just think thinking, feeling, and saying. Those are the three main ones, okay? Okay, excellent. So let's move on now. Who would like to read next? Igor, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing very well. How are you?
Sorry, I'm just saying hi to Alice in the chat. That's why I was muted. Okay, so if you could just read the next section down to the next yellow bit.
After certain? Just said.
After the link. So Inga just read down to the link. So by the way, so this link, if you want a complete list of verbs that always take the infinitive, sorry, not that always take the infinitive, but verbs that we will use with the infinitive. Please, you can click on that link for future reference. But Igor, if you could now take us from the infinitive is always used,
okay,
just until the next yellow section.
Okay, the infinitive is always used after adjectives. Disappointed, glad, happy, pleased, relieved, sad, surprised, etc. Yeah?
For example, e.g. is always for example.
No, but before.
Oh yes, etc. Sorry, yes.
Etc.
They're both Latin abbreviations.
Yeah. I was glad to help her. We were surprised to see them. It was too big to fit in the car, and besides, you were not strong enough to lift it.
Okay. So if you say something is too something, or sorry, an adjective is too much, it is too big, too fast, too strong, or enough, strong enough, high enough, you also will use the infinitive. Okay. Obviously, with normal adjectives, of course, as well, which were those first two examples. I was glad to help her, surprised to see them. Okay, this is just another very common usage of infinitives. Like I said, I'm trying to give you an overview of both of these, and then we're going to get into the gerund infinitive differences along the way. Okay, next section, if I could ask Evgenia, are you with us? Can you speak? Maybe. Try and fix your microphone if you can, Evgenia. I'll come back to you. Ishmael, are you there?
Yes, I am here, teacher.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Great. If you could read the next section for us, please, down to the next yellow line, the next yellow section. So for the most part, we're just going from yellow section to yellow section, unless I tell you otherwise. Okay.
Okay. It is used as a post modifier after certain abstract nouns: ability, desire, wish, need, wish, attempt, opportunity, etc. or indefinite pronouns: anything, no one, something, everybody, etc. For example, I have no desire to be rich. He had the opportunity to speak to the president. They needed something to talk about. There was no one at the party to speak to.
Okay, very good, Ishmael. Thank you for that. Yeah, no problem. So it is used after certain abstract nouns. You have to sort of know what they are, but they're often to do with desiring and wishing and these kinds of things. There should be a list somewhere on the internet. I didn't post a link. But yeah, the first two examples, you can see that. I have no desire to be rich. He had the opportunity to speak to the president. And then also indefinite pronouns like everybody, everyone, someone, something, anything. Okay, hopefully we know what indefinite pronouns are. And then you can always use an infinitive after those as well. Okay? Let me ask for an example then. Hazel, could you give me an example of an infinitive with an indefinite pronoun? That's not one of the ones I gave.
There is nobody to talk to today in the class.
Okay, that's good. That's good enough. I mean, it's similar to the examples, but I gave, but that's okay. I'll accept that. And how about Jose? Are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you give me an example using one of these abstract nouns and the infinitive?
I think I don't know.
Well, we just said there's certain abstract nouns and there are certain indefinite pronouns, and you will use the infinitive after these. Do you understand that or no?
Yes, but you can tell me.
So the two examples at the top are I have no desire to be rich, or he had the opportunity to speak to the president. So I'm saying look in the parentheses, because I gave a list of six nouns, and you can pick one of them and make a sentence and then add the infinitive to it. So for example,
yes.
Attempt.
Yes.
Or ability. How about ability?
And I have an ability to speak
Very
English.
good. Perfect. I have an ability to speak English. Okay? So these are the main ones. There are a few more. If you're really interested, you can find the list. But it's something you sort of pick up naturally. It seems normal to say I have an ability to speak English. No one really wants to say I have an ability speaking English. It doesn't really make sense to use the gerund in this case. So I think a lot of the time it's just the only option, and that's why you will use the infinitive. Okay. All right. The next section here. If I'm going to ask someone to read the whole of this section, Igor. I already asked Igor. Sorry. Paulina, are you with us? Paulina?
I'm here.
Okay, excellent. So we're gonna begin looking at gerunds now as well. I haven't actually defined a gerund, so you may not be 100% clear what this is, but it will make sense in a little bit because we're gonna do it. So if you could read the next section and write until the new heading that says the ing form of the verb.
There are also times when the infinitive follows more regular nouns, with verbs that must take a noun plus infinitive. For example, they encouraged us to go. We told him to be quiet.
Yeah, you can keep going until the next heading. So just say, here is a full list of such verbs, and then in certain cases, carry on. In certain cases.
In certain cases, however, the noun plus infinitive can be replaced with a gerund. For example, we advised him to think about it, or we advised thinking about it. Note that using a noun plus infinitive in the first example above will usually change who is performing the action.
Yes. Okay, or it could be a pronoun in this case, him. A noun or a pronoun. So there are certain verbs in which you have to use a noun plus infinitive. Okay, you have to encourage someone or somebody. You can just use a noun. You could have to encourage something or someone. But if it takes a verb after, it has to be the infinitive. We encouraged him to do this, and this is the first list. Now we have a list of verbs that if it's good to try and memorize. There aren't that many of them. When you always take an infinitive, okay? So I told him, or I told him to do something, okay? And these verbs, I must always take an infinitive.
Zach,
yes.
Sorry, Here, but we do not say yes with gerund him. Advised him to think, but advised thinking.
We advised thinking about it. Yes. So I'm coming on to this. This is the first set of verbs that must always take an infinitive if they are going to take a second verb, right? We can encourage him, or we encourage him to do something. We can't encourage gerund, right? For example, we encourage him to go. Encourage going. Actually, hold on a second. This might be a bad example.
In second sentence, so we don't understand what we are talking about.
Which second sentence are you talking about?
We advise thinking about it, but whom we advise?
We advise thinking about it. So this is the point. In the second list, there are some verbs that you can use either a gerund or an infinitive, or a noun plus infinitive. Okay. So you're replacing the noun plus infinitive, and the verb to advise is one of these examples. Okay, but here's my point. There is a difference, usually a difference in meaning, whether you use the infinitive, the noun plus infinitive, or the gerund.
Okay, it's not. I thought that's interchangeable there, but it's
no.
Okay.
It's not. They're not interchangeable. Sorry if I didn't make that clear. But you can use both. But that doesn't mean that if you say interchangeable, it usually means you can use both with the same meaning. In this case, as it says, it will. Underneath it says it will usually change who is performing the action. Okay. So we advised him to think about it, right? That's noun plus infinitive. Him, or pronoun, him plus to think. Okay. But if we replace the noun plus the infinitive with the gerund, which is just thinking about it, then we are the ones. Then there's no longer you're advising him. You're just advising. Okay. So it could be him, it could be her, it could be anyone. We don't know from the sentence. Okay. So the meaning is changed. It could be the same because you could still be advising him, but we're not specifying. We're not specific as to it. Okay. So now we see an example where sometimes you must use an infinitive. In other cases, depending on what you wish to say or who's doing the action, you could use both of them. Okay. So I strongly recommend looking at those two lists after the lesson when you have time, and you'll be able to tell the difference. Okay. 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 So let's move on to the next section now. So can somebody, Hazel, can you read from the ing form of the verb gerunds down to like the infinitive?
The ing form of the verb gerunds. When a verb ends in ing, it may be a gerund or a present participle. When we use a verb in ing form, more like a verb or an adjective, it is usually a present participle. Example, Anthony is running. I have an annoying boss. When we use a verb in ing form, more like a noun, it is usually a gerund. Example, fishing is fun. Since it is generally much easier to get confused between gerunds and infinitives than present participles and infinitives, we will be focusing on gerunds.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so here's the first thing to make sure we understand. If a verb ends in ing, so the base form plus ing, it could be a gerund or a past participle. Gerunds are when the verb is being used more like a noun. So if we look at the example we did above, we advised thinking about it. It's like the activity of thinking. This is a noun. Okay, so we take the verb to think and we turn it into an activity, which makes it a noun. On the other hand, sometimes there's a past participle, present participle, and that's when we're using the verb more sort of like an adjective. Okay, or a verb or an adjective. It could be present continuous, for example. We are thinking about it. That's a present participle. But there are not many cases when you will get confused between this and the infinitive. So that's why for the rest of the lesson, we're just going to be talking about the gerund. Okay? But it's also very useful to understand the differences between the gerund and the present participle. I've explained the very basic differences here, but that's a whole other lesson that we could do at another time. But today is mainly about gerunds and infinitives. Okay, so let's read the next section. I'll read the next section. Like the infinitive, gerunds can also follow certain verbs, adjectives, or nouns. Compare he agreed to wait and he suggested waiting, not he suggested to wait. That's because you have to use a gerund with the verb suggest. Okay, so that's an example of a verb. Now we'll do an adjective. She's ready to listen, or she's good at listening. Okay, not she is good to listen. This is an example with an adjective. You can't say she's good to listen. That doesn't make sense. It has to be at the act of listening. These are just random examples, so don't try. There are no rules. We're not really learning to concentrate too hard. I'm just giving you examples of some cases when we must use the infinitive and some when we must use the gerund. The need to talk, or the idea of talking. Okay, not the idea. Makes sense. As I've said just a moment ago, there is no easy way to decide which verbs, adjectives, and nouns are followed by a gerund and which are followed by an infinitive. We will look at some examples, but you should always check in a good dictionary. So that's why, unfortunately, at the end of this lesson, you're not going to have an instant knowledge of when to use the gerund and when to use the infinitive. A lot of it will require looking at these lists and learning the appropriate verbs, which ones take the gerund and which ones take the infinitive. But we can look at examples, okay? Okay, so this is the useful section, the one we're about to read. Who has not read yet? Evgenia, have you got your microphone fixed?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, loud and clear.
Okay.
Okay. So if you could read this is a long section, so why don't you stop at the end of crime novels. Stop at crime novels.
Where I should start?
We're at the top of the 3rd page.
There is no easy
Page in the document.
Mm.
Are you looking at the document, Evgenia?
Yes, I look at, but I don't know where I should start.
At the top of the 3rd page.
The idea of talking. Yes?
No, like infinitive. Do you understand at the top of the page? I'm not sure how else to say it. Page 3. The beginning of page 3.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, Evgenia, we're gonna
help her.
Yeah. Yes. Do you want to read?
No.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I see. Explain.
In Russian.
Yeah, Евгения, с 3-й страницы, где
Я
написано
поняла,
like
что с
infinitive.
3-й страницы, но у меня
Там, где like, начинается like infinitive.
Первая желтая, выделенная желтым.
like infinitives.
Да.
Yes, да.
Like infinitives, gerunds can also be used with the subject, object, or complement of a sentence. For example, learning English is not easy. We enjoy learning English. The most important thing is learning. Or it can take an object itself. Smoking cigarettes is bad for you. I don't like reading crime novels.
Okay, and then again, and read the. Actually, keep reading. Keep going.
Note that using the infinitive as the subject or complement of a sentence sounds more formal, and it's quite rare nowadays. For example, to behave oneself is quite important. One is much more likely to say behaving oneself is quite important. It's more difficult to know whether an infinitive or a gerund is
appropriate.
Appropriate is the object of a sentence. Some verbs always take to infinitive as an object. For example, I choose to go home after dinner. While other verbs always take gerunds. For example, they enjoy playing chess together.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so what we learned here is that often you can use an infinitive or a gerund as the subject object, or complement. Okay, and sometimes they are interchangeable and they mean exactly the same thing. But if we're talking about subject or complement, it's not very often that you will use an infinitive as the subject of a sentence. Okay, so even though gerunds are nouns and infinitives are the sort of general form of a verb, they can mean the same thing, more or less. So I can say to go to the cinema is one of my favorite activities. Okay, or I can say going to the cinema is one of my favorite activities. They're both correct, but using the infinitive as a subject is much, much rarer nowadays. Most 90%, not 100, but most of the time, you will want to use a gerund in this case. If you are talking about the activity and you're using the verb as a noun, it sounds more natural and normal to use the ing form of the verb. Okay, but you can use the infinitive in these cases. The times are when we're talking about the object. Okay, when the object of the sentence. So you have the verb, you have the subject, verb, and then the object. And some verbs, and this is probably the most common time when you will get confused between the infinitive and the gerund, and when you will say the wrong one. Okay, so these two lists that I've put links to underneath are probably the two most important lists to learn, if you learn any lists, of the most common verbs, some of which will always take an infinitive and some of which will always take a gerund. So for example, the verb to want something, that always has to take an infinitive. Okay, I want to do this, I want to do that. Okay, if they say I want to fly a kite, you can't say I want flying a kite. That just doesn't make sense because the verb want always takes an infinitive. Okay, so this is what I mean. You just need to learn these two lists when we're talking about the infinitive or the gerund as the object of the sentence. We'll clear up some of the confusion that often arises between using the gerund and infinitive. And we're going to have practice. We're going to leave time at the end to do some practice on these, so we'll be able to look at some more examples, I think. Okay, so now this next section is just about gerunds. We're stepping away from the infinitive gerund debate for a second, but it's just to give you more understanding of when gerunds are used. Who has not read yet? Hazel, have you've read? You've read?
I've read, yes.
Yeah.
I've read.
Jose, you have not read. Can you just read the next little section on gerunds? Jose? Jose?
Oh, sorry. I mixed.
That's okay.
We can also?
Yes.
We can also use gerunds with adjectives or articles. For example, pointless questioning the making of Titanic. Note that when we use the gerund with an article, it doesn't not usually to take a direct object. For example, a settling of debts, not a settling debts.
Okay, so again, if we look at a gerund like an activity, right? It's taking a verb and turning it into an activity. Then you could, just in the same way that you can use an adjective to describe an activity. It was a fun hike, for example. You can use an adjective to describe the gerund when it's being used for the activity. So in this case, I said pointless questioning. The activity of questioning. If someone is interrogating someone else, but the other person refuses to give any answers, then it's a pointless questioning. Okay. And then the other thing is, obviously, you can use it with articles as well, in the same way that you use nouns with articles. So I wrote the making of Titanic. But the important thing is to remember that it doesn't take a direct object. So you always have to put of in there. The making of Titanic, a settling of debts. Okay? This is just a pretty straightforward rule when it comes to gerunds. All right? Okay, so now we're coming back to the debate, the great debate between gerunds and infinitives. And here's a great rule, because whenever you have a preposition, you have to have a gerund after the preposition. You can never have an infinitive. Okay? So we're just going to read this rule. Paulina, could you read the next rule?
Yes. If we want to use a verb after preposition, it must be a gerund. It is impossible to use an infinitive after a preposition. So, for example, we say, I will call you after arriving at the party. After my arrival at the party. Tara always dreams about going on holiday or about holidays.
Okay, so obviously there is a certain number of prepositions. I'm not going to list them here because there's already too many lists in this document, but you should all know your prepositions. And if I want to use a verb after a preposition, it's always going to be the gerund. Okay? So you can't say, I will call you after to arrive at the party. Right? That makes no sense. And this is an obvious time to use. This isn't even really like, would you use an infinitive? It's just obvious in this case that you would use a gerund, I think.
Can I say,
Right.
I will call you after I arrive at the party?
Absolutely, yes. I will call you after I arrive. Then you can use the normal verb form as well. And because remember, gerunds are just like nouns. It's turning the verb into the activity. You can often replace them with the noun form as well. So that's why afterwards I wrote the other example, or after my arrival at the party, which is closer to what Igor was saying with after I arrive at the party. So it's arriving, you're not specifying, but or you could use the possessive form, my arrival at the party. Sometimes you might have to drop the gerund if you want to replace it with a noun. You can. Tara always dreams about going on holiday. You basically want to say about holidays in that case. You wouldn't say Tara always dreamed. You could say Tara always dreamed about the act of going on holiday, right? And then but you're not really getting rid of the gerund, if you see what I mean in that case. So it's just easier to say she dreams about holidays, because people don't dream about the going on holiday. They just dream about holidays or going on holiday. I hope that's clear. Maybe I didn't explain that very well, but it's not a very important issue. The main point I'm trying to convey is that you can often replace the gerund with a noun form in some way. Okay, so that's a time when you always have to use the gerund. Now it gets a bit trickier again, unfortunately, for us. Inga, could you read the next section down to the second link, actually, down to the second link. Yeah.
We often wish to place one verb after another verb in a sentence. Often the second verb is in infinitive. For example, I want to go home. However, sometimes the second verb must be in gerund form. For example, I dislike going to the theater. This depends on the first verb. Certain verbs can take either a gerund or an infinitive without a big change in meaning. The most common are begin, continue, hate, intend, like, love, prefer, propose, start. For example, I like to play football, playing football. It started to rain or raining. A great list of verbs that can take either a gerund or infinitive without a big change in the meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, keep going, sorry.
No.
Oh yeah, that is the second link. Yeah. You're like, no, don't make me keep changing. Okay, that's fine. So sometimes, in certain cases, you will if you have two verbs next to each other, you will have to use the gerund, right? So you cannot say I dislike to go to the theater. That doesn't make any sense because the verb dislike always has to take a gerund. Here is another list. This is probably the third most useful list to learn on this topic. We already did the two before when it comes to the object of the sentence. And now you should learn this list of verbs that must always take the gerund. Okay? And then there are certain verbs that can take either. There are certain verbs that can be the gerund or the infinitive, and it's not going to really affect what the person understands whom you are speaking to. So if I say it's started to rain or it started raining, doesn't really matter. Okay? That's because the verb to start can take either one. And again, you have to learn that on the list, I'm afraid. There is a slight difference in meaning, but it doesn't really matter in these cases. So if you say it started raining, you're talking more about the real physical activity of raining. And if you say it started to rain, then you're talking about the more kind of general possible act of raining. I suppose. Okay? Because again, think about it, like the gerund is the noun, it's concrete, and the infinitive is more kind of general, right? But it's not really going to affect the conversation anyway. People will definitely understand. Okay. So the first list of verbs that must always take the gerund. The second is a list of verbs that can take the gerund or the infinitive, and the meaning will not be very different. And the third list, which we're going to look at now, is verbs in which there will be a difference in meaning. They can still take either. They can take the gerund or the infinitive, but there will be a difference in meaning depending on how you use them. And we're going to look at that, one or two examples quickly now. I'll just read this section. Okay, however, there often is a change in meaning. For example, compare he kept speaking to he kept 4 bags of sugar to make sure he had enough. Okay? The first example of the verb kept, or to keep, is speaking, is the gerund. And the second one, which takes an object, you use the infinitive. Okay? But you see, in this case, it takes an object, right? The verb to keep takes the object 4 bags of sugar. And so it changes the meaning, actually, of the verb. So in the first case, he kept speaking, he keeps speaking. The verb to keep means to continue doing something, to keep speaking. He won't shut up, he just keeps speaking. In the second case, the verb to keep means to guard, to store something, to not let go of it. Okay? So this is what I mean. The verb itself can take both, but the verb might have different meanings depending on which one. So let's actually look at that list now, because this is the end. If we click on the link, so you can see the begin, for example.
Yes.
She began singing. Then if you're using the verb to begin in a non-continuous sense, then you can use either the gerund or the infinitive. She began singing or she began to sing. So this is like the previous list. But if she is beginning to sing, you don't say she is beginning singing, right? If it's continuous already, it wouldn't make sense to have another gerund. So the problem is that each of these verbs has their own funny things about them, okay? And that's just something you have to learn and practice and get used to. But the overall point here is that some verbs can take both and the meaning's not very different. Others can take both and the meaning is different. Others can only take the gerund. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. That's basically the most important things are all in this document about telling the difference between the two. We're going to do some exercise and practices now. Please have another look at the... in fact, we're going to do exercises on the other document that I recommend. So I have to give... I'm not sure if I'm being naughty or not, but I have to give a big shout out or a big acknowledgement to this document on EnglishPage.com, which is a very, very thorough treatment of the whole thing. I tried to, as well as using other sources, I tried to extract the most important examples of when you might want to use the gerund and when you might want to use the infinitive. But if you struggled with any of this, then please also read this page here, okay? Because it was the most in-depth treatment of the subject that I could find. Okay, and it'll take some of the things that we talked about in this lesson, and it'll go into more detail on them. All right, but right now let's do some exercise and go to the bottom of this page. I'll post a link to it again right now. If everyone can click there and go to the bottom. Okay, you all there?
Yeah.
In fact, I should have just. This is the exercise we're doing. Now, again, some of this is going to come to you with practice. So you're already going to know, intuitively, which verbs take which one. If you don't worry about it. It's because you haven't practiced enough. So that's what we're going to be doing now. We'll be practicing. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Igor, can you do the first one for us on that list, or can you have a go?
Dan enjoys reading science fiction.
Very good. The verb to enjoy always takes a gerund. That's on that list. Okay. Inga, can you do the next one?
Cheryl suggested seeing a movie after work.
Very good. You don't suggest to see something. Suggested always takes seen. Okay. Jose, can you do the next one?
Yes. I miss working in the travel industry. Maybe I can get my old job back.
Yeah, excellent. Next one, Hazel, can you do that?
Where did you learn to speak Spanish?
Perfect.
Was it in Spain or in Latin America?
Yeah. So these are very simple examples. These words are both on different lists. These are verbs that always take the gerund or always take the infinitive. Okay. Do you mind, Evgenia, can you do that?
Do you mind to help me translate this word?
No.
Helping.
Yes. And this isn't really a verb. To mind something, it's not really a verb. But you should just know about the expression. It always takes the gerund. To mind, I don't mind helping you. Do you mind helping me? This means, does it bother you to do that? Okay? On the other hand, if you say, does it bother you, then you must use the infinitive. Does it bother you to help me translate this letter? Okay? Okay, number 6. Paulina, can you do that one for us?
He asked talking to the store manager, right?
He asked, no.
To talk.
To talk.
Yeah, yes, exactly. He asked to talk. Always takes the infinitive to ask a question. The problem is, I don't think, I looked at this and I don't think from what I understand that there's no common thread, unfortunately, which is why like I said, it's a difficult topic. It's not easy to say verbs. It's like irregular verbs. You just have to learn them. It's the most annoying part of learning a new language, when there's not like an easy rule to apply in each case. But luckily, the lists are not too big and they cover the most common verbs. So unfortunately, you just have to learn these. Okay, you've never mentioned Igor.
You never mentioned living in Japan before. How long did you live there?
Very good. Perfect. Okay, if he keeps, Inga?
If he keeps coming to work late, he's going to get fired.
Yes. Now remember, the verb to keep is on the list that it can take either, but if it takes either, it has to take a direct object as well. In this case, it doesn't make sense because you're not talking about keeping an object or anything like that. So we have to use the gerund, okay? Debbie plans. Jose?
Debbie plans to study abroad next year.
Yep. And I agreed. Hazel?
I agreed to help Jack wash his car.
Excellent. Okay. Hazel, since you suggested this lesson, was there anything in particular about gerunds and infinitives? Were there particular times when you got confused? Because maybe I can help, or has everything we covered sort of more or less cleared things up?
I hoped I don't have to memorize all the verbs. That's why I asked this, because some teachers told me that I don't have to memorize, and others told me that I have to memorize. And
so let me ask you, what did the ones who said you don't have to memorize tell you?
A teacher said that if I use the infinitive, it means that the action will be in the future, and when I use the gerund, the action is happening at the present or in the past. No,
that's not true. Let me give you an example. The verb to like, for example, this is on the list of this is a very small list, by the way, of verbs that can take the gerund or the infinitive with very small difference in meaning.
Yes,
okay?
I know, like when it is used with the gerund, it is general, and when it is used with the infinitive, it is for a specific activity. I like to swim or something like that. if I say I like swimming or I like reading, it's a general activity which I like. But
It's well, I would say they're both kind of general, right? Because you're not talking about a particular type of swimming. You're talking about the activity of swimming. I like the activity of swimming, or I like to swim. Again, it's the difference that I said. Swimming sounds a bit more concrete and real. To swim sounds a little bit more sort of airy-fairy or general, but they both mean the same thing. And there's definitely no difference in tense. They're both just general present statements.
Okay.
So. Yeah, let me. If you know which teacher told you that, let me have a discussion with him.
No, I cannot.
not an argument, a discussion.
No.
Okay. All right. Let's go on to. Oh, go
anyway,
ahead.
I think this exercise will help me very much to memorize the verbs, which.
I would hope they do. Okay. Let's do a few more. Let's look at lesson ends. Let's look at this one here. Please, everyone, click on this one. Okay, now it's a bit more difficult because we're looking at verbs that sometimes take gerunds and sometimes take infinitives, and sometimes they can take both with a difference in meaning. Okay. Okay. So who had not gone? Paulina, can you try the first one?
I can't stand you're complaining all the time.
Yes. So gerunds can sometimes take possessives. Okay, it could be my annoying you, or her complaining, or something like this. Just like a noun can take a possessive, so can a gerund. So I can't stand the noun. It wouldn't make sense. You know, it's just in the same way. Here's a good example for I can't stand. I can't stand red buses. I can't stand long lines outside the post office. You would use nouns here. You would never dream of using an infinitive. So you also wouldn't dream of using an infinitive when you're using a gerund. It's just natural to talk about the gerund because it's like a noun. Okay? So well done, Paulina. The next one, our teacher won't allow. Evgenia, can you do that one?
Is it next exercise? Because I can't find it.
I posted in the chat. If you look in the chat and just click on that link, and then do number 2 in the verbling chat.
I will find it. Maybe someone else do this.
Okay. Igor, do you want to give it a shot?
Our teacher won't allow us using dictionary during the test.
No. Allow must always take an infinitive.
Us to use?
Yes, exactly. Our teacher won't allow us to use. You allow someone to do something. Okay?
Yeah.
Let me think. Allow someone. Yeah, and this is quite if you think about it, right, you wouldn't really want to talk about, well, allow us. Yeah, it's hard to say. Allow us hitting. Yeah, it's not, again, it's just on the list. You have to learn it. I'm sorry. It's useless. I feel useless teaching this in a way because it's like teaching irregular verbs, you know? Yes. In a way. But at the same time, we've gone over sometimes when you can use both, and you know these lists will help clarify things for you. But I think to allow someone to do it always takes the infinitive. Just allow always takes the infinitive. You have to just remember that. Okay. Next one. We advised. Inga?
We advised him to take a taxi instead of walking to the restaurant.
Yes, exactly. You could say advised, again, as we had the example before, can actually take both, right? Allows him taking the taxi.
Here we have.
But if you have if you have a noun, then you must use the infinitive. If not, you have to remove the noun. So again, like the example we did before, we advised taking a taxi instead of walking to the restaurant. Okay? But if you put a pronoun in there, then you have to say to. Then you have to use the infinitive. Okay? Let's just do one more. The city. parking. Okay, I'm embarrassed now. Go on the next one. The city doesn't allow...
To park?
Yeah, that's why I'm embarrassed, because it's not to park. So I'm trying to think what the rule is here. Doesn't allow... it's exactly the same as advise. It's exactly the same as advise. Okay?
My parking?
If yes, you could say the city doesn't allow my parking along curb. This is very strange, because why would the city care about my parking? But grammatically, this is correct.
On second example, won't allow us using. Is correct the same or no?
My parking.
Second. No,
parking.
second example.
Yeah.
Our teacher won't allow us using dictionaries during the test.
My parking doesn't allow my parking. Doesn't allow us using. Yeah, you can do that. It just doesn't sound very right. It's definitely correct, but it doesn't sound right.
For me, it sounds the same.
Us to use. Us to use. I'll have to see which list allow is on, but you can say us to use or us using. Doesn't allow us using, but us to use sounds much more correct, because normally you will allow someone to do something. Okay?
I heard native English speaking that they speak wanting, for example.
Yes.
If you're wanting to do something, if you're wanting, they speak.
Yeah, but this is different. Want is like, okay? No, sorry, want is not like. Want is on the list of verbs that always takes an infinitive.
Yeah, but they speak with wanting in gerund. I heard on YouTube English native speakers. So
okay.
I don't know.
Can't hear you, Zach.
I think he's connected.
Can anyone hear me? Because I can't. Now I can hear people.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, we got cut off for a second there. So with allow, where are we here? Doesn't allow parking. If there is a person involved, it's similar to advise. If there is someone that you're something, then you have to allow someone to do something. Okay. Allow us using. It sounds much more natural. I will have to look at the list. I'm not going to say it's grammatically correct or incorrect to say to allow us using, but it doesn't sound as normally. Normally, you would just say allow parking if there is no object. As soon as you have an object in the form of a person, you want exactly the same with advise. You could advise parking somewhere, or you advise us to park somewhere. Does that make sense? Sort of? Okay. I think it's on the same list as advise. The problem is it gets a bit tricky, because some of these are quite irregular, and even though I'm obviously a native English speaker, you have to be like, is this right or is this wrong? But I'm sorry I told you the wrong thing about allow in the first place. So anyway, we have to run to the next lesson now. Please take a look at this English page document, as well as my document. You'll find much of the information is the same. And then just spend some time and learning the verbs, so you don't get confused about verbs like to allow, like I did. Okay. But these are the edge cases. The best lists to learn are the ones where verbs always take the gerund or they always take the infinitive. And once you've learned both of them and you have them separated in your minds, then you'll find you'll very rarely with this.
You will be more confused.
No, you'll be less confused. Less confused when you learn those lists. So
in my opinion.
No. Look at those the 4 links that I pointed you to in the second half of our class. Take a look at all of those lists, and it'll give you really good examples of each one. Okay?
And do exercises, I think.
And do the exercises, yes. This English page is fantastic. It's a really, really good resource, and you can keep doing the exercises that we were just doing, and then ask it to check the answers for you. Okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, guys. That's all we have time for today, unfortunately. I've got a very fun lesson about to come up, if anyone has time to come to it.
Sure.
Go on for more than into a document of 15 minutes. And some new words. And so completely away from grammar. Do some listening practice and some conversation around that. Okay? Sorry, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm really sorry. This isn't a simpler subject, Jared. But that's why they created this resource. It's something that's, you know, it's a tricky subject. It's like when you learn irregular verbs, you have to learn these lists of verbs for gerunds and infinitive. There aren't too many areas of English that are like this, but this is one of them, unfortunately. So, hold on one second. Nicola had a question in the chat. I just want to answer. Going to the cinema. What I've seen people use, I prefer to read fantasy books. I think I prefer is like Nicola. I prefer is in the same category as like, by which I mean it can take a gerund or an infinitive, and the difference is not very big. Okay? I prefer reading fantasy books, or I prefer to read fantasy books. And this should be easy to remember, because to state a preference is to state which one you like more. So it's basically the same as like. So that was that particular example. Okay, guys, thank you for coming. I will see you all hopefully in the next lesson, if not next week. And let me know if there are any grammar topics you want me to cover. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.